A very, very warm evening to all of you, and especially Professor Pathak to having joined us. And we are extremely elated and very happy to welcome him for this session with India Look Foundation. Professor Pathak is an eminent sociologist in the country. He has superannuated from sociology department in JNU. He has been contributing extensively through his dialogic method to engage with these social upheavals in the country and across the world. We have many books that he has contributed into, journal articles, and he continuously writes for leading newspapers in the country. Today, it's a very happy time, and I hope that we all keep this interaction, this session, a very, very interactive one, where we can ask questions, form opinions and express that, as well as, have any kind of comments that you want to share. And Professor Pathak will be speaking on dialogue, compassionate listening, and engaged pedagogy, a teacher's quest in these difficult times. So we have 2 hours to listen to and engage, as well as, culminate the session. That's all. Over to you, sir.
Okay, Rashmi, thank you very much. Nice to see you. Thank you, organizers. This is my second time here. And thank you once again for giving me this opportunity to be here, to share some of my views with you, interact with all of you. Just to begin with, there is a small note. It's a free-floating dialogue and conversation. So feel very easy and comfortable. And I urge you at the end of my talk, what I wish to share with you, feel free to make your observation, to ask your questions, and so that it really becomes a meaningful conversation and dialogue. As I have said, it's a free-floating conversation, so you need not be a student of any particular discipline, be it physics or history, sociology or literature. If you are just a learner, no matter whether you are learning physics or history or literature, if there is studentship in us, then I think that you would be able to appreciate the very theme of this discussion today. This is about dialogue, compassionate listening, and engaged pedagogy, a teacher's quest in troubled times, in these difficult times. So, let me begin with a small background. It's not just autobiographical, it is also sociological, political, and cultural. When I joined the vocation of teaching way back in 1990, there was a dream. And many of us at that time who joined this vocation celebrated that dream, loved to celebrate that dream. And that dream was about that teaching is of a qualitatively different kind of job. It is not just yet another 9-to-5 job, routinized, structured, soulless. So the dream was that a teacher is not just a subject expert or the subject specialist. Of course, she is, but she is something more than that, not just a subject expert or specialist. A teacher is not just an official techno manager whose task is only to complete the official syllabus, cover the prescribed reading, take tests and exams, and grade and hierarchize students. Of course, a teacher does this job, but the job doesn't end there. A teacher is something more. So not just a manager who is only completing the official duty of completing the syllabus, taking tests and exams, and grading students. or a teacher is not just a subject expert, there is something more. And we celebrated that something more. We were coming from different disciplines, different areas of specialization and expertise. We took exam, completed the syllabus, but the task didn't end there. There was something more we were striving for, we were dreaming of. And what was that something more, something surplus? Let me begin with that. And that surplus is that a teacher is primarily a wanderer. And when I say a wanderer, I mean a teacher is continually undertaking a journey through a carved trajectory of life, culture, knowledge system, politics, and the oceanic realm of ideas. So he or she is a wanderer, moving around a forest of ideas, visions, politics, thinking. So there is a spirit of being a wanderer. And the fact that a teacher ought to be a wanderer as we dream, we also celebrated that a teacher is also a co-traveler. A teacher is a co-traveler with his or her students. Teacher and students collectively walking together, passing through a dense forest, trying to make sense of it, raising new questions, problematizing the world, exploring the world, and constantly learning and unlearning together. So it's a journey, a teacher and the student collectively in the process of a dialogue continually undertaking. That was the dream that we celebrated. So we didn't see ourselves merely as subject experts. We didn't see ourselves merely as paid professional employees who gets the salary check at the end of the month and does a 9 to 5 job. We thought that this job has a different kind of calling. It's a job of a different kind. And that difference, I am talking about that mode, that surplus, that as a teacher, you are a wanderer, you are a co-traveler with young learners, with students. You are continually discovering and rediscovering the world, raising new questions, problematizing the world, and imagining a better world through art, through literature, through science, through poetry, through physics, through explorations. So that was the dream we celebrated. And if I could sustain myself in this vocation for more than 3 decades, that was precisely because that dream was alive for these 3 decades, continually celebrated that dream. If every morning at 9 a.m., winter or summer, I could come to the classroom with an amount of freshness and energy without a sense of nausea and boredom, that was precisely because of that dream that we celebrated. Certain kind of an inspiration, certain kind of a dream. And that dream, I believe, makes this vocation extremely musical, extremely beautiful, and qualitatively different. That's why I keep saying it's not yet another 9 to 5 job, routinized, structured, and soulless. It is an enchanting vocation. Now, having said that, giving this background and that dream that I strongly believe in, that keeps us alive. Now, having said that, now what I'm trying to converse with you today is that we live today in an altogether different time. Now, many of my young students say that this is the age where all dreams have disappeared, where all dreams have ceased to exist. This is a very hard, pragmatic, violent world full of surveillance, full of restriction of ideas. And in that world, it is exceedingly difficult to retain the dream of being a constant explorer, free inquirer, and the free wanderer. But I continue to believe that we have to retain that dream alive, retain that hope alive. And that's why I have chosen to speak and share some of my ideas with you on this theme, that about what this vocation is all about. And that's why I have chosen, when you speak of that dream with which I began, then I would talk about that what a teacher does and what kind of a learning milieu a teacher visualizes, ought to visualize, which is becoming increasingly difficult today in these troubled times, in these difficult times. And in that context, I believe that the three ideals which I have put in my lecture theme, dialogue, compassionate listening, and engaged pedagogy. Now, just come, and all of you are aware of that, but just come with a brief reflection on these three concepts. When I speak of dialogue, when I speak of compassionate listening, and when I'm speaking of engaged pedagogy. Now, dialogue, when you speak of dialogue, I believe that you would agree with me that dialogue does not mean that there is necessarily a consensus. Dialogue does not mean that there is an agreement. Suppose I am engaging in a dialogue with you, that does not mean that you and I necessarily agree on every point. Dialogue does not mean that you and I instantly arrive at a consensus. That's not the substance of dialogue. Instead, what dialogue means, that dialogue means acknowledgement of the living presence of the other. That I can have a conversation, I can have a dialogue with you only when I am ready to acknowledge you as a living person, as a living consciousness, and I begin to take you seriously. Instead, dialogue is possible only when I refuse to objectify you as a thing. I refuse to castigate you as an inferior species. Dialogue is possible only when we engage in an act of reciprocity. You see me as a living consciousness and the subject. I see you as a living consciousness and subject. And these two living souls, two living consciousness, two living subjects are collectively trying to make sense of the world. So dialogue is not about agreement and consensus. Instead, dialogue is about that fundamental act of respect to others, that I do not objectify you, I do not castigate you. Instead, I acknowledge your living presence and I see you as a living subject, and then we begin to converse. Likewise, dialogue means a sense of openness, a sense of humility. So when I engage in a dialogue with you, and that dialogue is impossible unless I realize that there might be occasions when I might be wrong. And it is not a bad idea to expand my horizon and to learn from others. And that is possible only when there is a sense of humility on the part of both of us, that we are not perfect, we are not absolutist, we are open enough to negotiate. We realize that there are moments when my viewpoint might be inadequate and I might learn from you. So there is a possibility, constant possibility of expansion of horizons. So dialogue requires that sense of openness and sense of humility. And finally, dialogue requires a constant protest against all sorts of depersonalization and objectification. It requires, as philosopher Martin Buber would argue, an I-thou relationship, not I-it relationship. It's a relationship, as I have just said, between two subjects, two living consciousness. And as finally, as I would say, dialogue is not about what you and I today see in the name of debate contest, debate competition. So any television channel, when you look at the debate, panel discussion, you do not experience dialogue. Instead, you see only noise. Why do you experience noise? Because none is willing to listen to other. Everyone's point is already fixed. Before coming to the studio, they came with a mind and they leave the studio with the same mind. No expansion of horizon take place, and the urge is to silence others, to defeat others. Or the kind of debate contest that we learned in our school days, where there is a motion, someone is for it, someone is against it. You spoke for the motion, and instead of learning anything from you, I am now preparing myself to refute everything that you have said because I am against the motion. It is not dialogue. It is an urge to defeat others. Dialogue doesn't begin with an urge to silence others, to defeat others, to demonize others. Dialogue begins with an urge to be open, to be receptive, to converse, to listen. And that's why dialogue is impossible without I-thou relationship. It is against depersonalization. It is against objectification. And dialogue requires, here my second concept comes, compassionate listening. Listening, you and I know, is not just hearing. Listening is that I enter with empathy. Listening requires empathy. I imagine myself in your position and I seek to understand from what vantage point you are speaking. I seek to understand your pain, your dilemmas, your anguish, your hope, your aspiration through which you are speaking. So dialogue requires compassion, empathy, perseverance. In other words, it requires a very, very important quality of being compassionate listening. You know about that Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese Buddhist monk who died last year. He was very fond of speaking loving kindness and compassionate listening in a polarized world, in a violent world, in a divided world. And in one of his talks, Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about Osama bin Laden has to be listened to. He has to be listened to. It is easy to bomb him. It is easy to kill him. It is easy to castigate him as a terrorist, as a mass murderer, mass killer. But it is exceedingly difficult to talk to him, to listen to him. What is it that led him to this path, that took him to this path? And when you begin to listen to that Osama bin Laden, it is also important, as Thich Nhat Hanh say, that what was the pathology of power and privilege that, for instance, United States embodied? Now, can one understand Osama bin Laden without looking at another kind of aberration of power and the pathology that at one time United States embodied and represented? Vietnam War, carpet bombing, Gulf War, American imperialism, American techno-military power. So Osama bin Laden too has to be talked to, has to be listened to. In one of his talks, Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about. And that comes from his Buddhist compassion and arguing about the compassionate listening is part of everyday religious practice. So when you talk about dialogue, it is also impossible without that art of listening, without compassionate listening. Dialogue and compassionate listening will take you and me to the third concept I'm talking about, engaged pedagogy. Now, what is engaged pedagogy we are talking about? Again, if I refer to Thich Nhat Hanh, when there was a Vietnam War in the 60s, he was a young Buddhist monk in Vietnam. And there was a deep realization that what is religiosity? And he would say that I am a Buddhist monk. Is it my only task to be in the monastery and to concentrate only on my nirvana, only on my meditation, or whether religiosity has to be engaged. It has to be engaged with the world. My meditative quest has to relate itself to the world outside. If the world outside is burning, can I remain peaceful inside all the time? How my religiosity has to engage with the world out there. And no wonder Thich Nhat Hanh actively worked with Martin Luther King Jr., engaged in the peace movement, raised voice against the war, and try to see that religiosity should be an engaged religiosity for creating a better world, human world, just world. So when we talk about that engaged religiosity, likewise, we have an engaged pedagogy, engaged educational practice, engaged studentship, engaged teaching. And what is that engaged pedagogy? It's not just about becoming an expert in a subject. It is not about learning medieval history, thermodynamics and geometry, electronics and physics. Engaged pedagogy is also about how my education, how my learning helps me to take me to the world outside, the world that is exploitative, that is violent, that is unjust, and how through my education I create a new awareness so that I can create a better world. I can contribute something to the making of a better world. So that is what the purpose of engaged pedagogy is all about. It is not just learning a discipline. It is also how this learning, how this knowledge becomes potent enough, knowledge as a catalyst that enables me to go back to the world outside and to create a better world, to strive for a better world, to fight injustice, to fight exploitation, to create a better world. And when we talk about engaged pedagogy, let me very briefly, and all of you as brilliant scholars, students are aware with, that let me talk about, just to add to it, 3-4 names, ideas. The moment you talk about engaged pedagogy, there's a name that would come to your mind. This is the Brazilian thinker, educationist, say Paulo Freire. When Freire talks about dialogue, now what did he mean? He was saying, look at your own childhood, most of our own childhood. Many of us in a conventional school grew up with what Freire would argue a form of banking education, where there is an all-knowing teacher, all-powerful teacher. He or she comes to the class, bombards your mind with information, with concepts, with theories, and you are essentially a passive, empty vessel. You are merely a receiver. Teacher delivers, you consume. But you are never an active component of this learning process, active part of this learning process. Freire calls it pedagogy of the oppressed. Students are like oppressed entities, and teacher is the all-powerful oppressor. And instead, Freire says no liberation, no emancipation is possible unless we alter this pedagogy and create a new form of pedagogy, not the banking form of education, where you are passive, empty vessel, and the teacher is the all-knowing teacher. Teacher is silencing you. Instead now, active, engaged pedagogy, where teacher and the student collectively listening to one another, problematizing the world together, raising new questions, and exploring the world. And whereas a student, you are equally engaged and active. You too are contributing to the making of knowledge. This is what he calls dialogic education. In other words, problem posing meaningful education is impossible without the constant dialogue between the teacher and the student. And how is that dialogue possible? Dialogue is not possible unless the teacher is interested in listening to you. Teacher might disagree with you. Teacher, because of his or her seniority and knowledge, might alter your position, might add something to what you have said. But the teacher is all the time seeing you as a potential flower that will be bloomed. And the teacher is only watering it. So teacher respects you. Teacher sees you as a possibility, as a plant that has to be nurtured. And teacher as a beautiful gardener who is just seeing that you get sufficient water and the sunshine so that you bloom. So this is what you would call the dialogue. And it is impossible unless the teacher sees you as a living subject, not an object, passive, empty, depersonalized, soulless object, but active subject and the learner. And teacher allows students to converse, to bring about their experience, to add to the debate, to contribute to the debate, not just to note down everything mechanically that the teacher has said in the classroom, but a dialogue, and this dialogue requires the teacher and the students are listening to each other, listening to one another. That is where the Paulo Freire talk about an engaged pedagogy of liberation through this dialogic education. Likewise, another name immediately comes, Bell Hooks. She died also last year. Afro-American feminist, educationist, spiritualist, such a multidimensional, brilliant figure. And many of you must have read her books, written number of books. And the areas she has covered are amazing, from gender to racism, to patriarchy, to education, to religiosity, to love. The entire spectrum is amazing. Now, one of her amazing beautiful book is Teaching to Transgress, where she drew her inspiration from Paulo Freire, dialogic education, and also from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk. And Bell Hooks, I'll just give you in Teaching to Transgress one illustration, and you will understand her mind and what kind of an education, dialogic, transformative, engaged pedagogy she is talking about. So she says that here is a white male-dominated American university classroom, and I'm teaching, gender studies. And largely the classroom is being dominated by white male and the white female students. Now, there are very few Black students. And there was one particular Black female student. And she would generally remain very uneasy in the classroom and remain very docile and the passive, very uneasy. And because the classroom would largely be, Bell Hooks would see that essentially the white students would try to dominate the classroom discussion. White students, both the male, female students, would try to dominate. But Bell Hooks, as someone who has learned a great deal from Paulo Freire and Thich Nhat Hanh, dialogue and compassionate listening, she would slowly try to create an environment in the class where she would encourage her students, bring your own experience in the classroom. I'm talking about gender. I'm talking about gender studies. My task is not just to bombard your mind only by bombarding your mind with the text of Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler. I have to talk to you. You are experiencing this world, living in this world. How you experience patriarchy, how you experience racism, what kind of violence, brute, symbolic, subtle violence you experience in your life as a woman. Bring those experiences. And no teaching is possible unless the teacher listens to these experiences, engages in a conversation with those experiences. So she says that with that process of engaged pedagogy, one day the miracle happens that shy, not so sure, passive, fearful female Black student rose up. And she, with her black accent in a white male-dominated classroom, began to speak of her experience, where, the confluence of racism, racial oppression and exploitation, and also the patriarchy, and she spoke of her experience. And she spoke and she spoke. And bell hooks created an environment where she could open up. It was almost like a catharsis. She could open up and she spoke. And bell hooks described, after the class lecture was over, when I came out of the class, that student came near me, tears in her eyes, and she embraced me. And bell hooks described it eye to eye. And she said, "Ma'am, today you made it possible. I feel lightness of being. I feel myself relieved. I could speak what was hidden, what was repressed. Now it came out. I could speak. I could narrate my experience. Today I regained my subjectivity. I regained my personhood. I begin to see myself not as a inferior human being. I begin to see myself as a possibility, as a human subject." Bell hooks describe that is what an engaged pedagogy does. That is what a beautiful classroom does. That is what a dialogic relationship between the teacher and the student does. And that is the power of the engaged pedagogy. So there was another beautiful, great Canadian-American sociologist, very active today also in his writing. He wrote, a beautiful book, Teachers as Transformative Intellectuals, teachers as transformative intellectuals, and he was talking about that, don't see teacher as just, with which I began, as just someone is a manager who just complete the syllabus and takes the test and the exam. Teacher does something more. Teacher engages in a conversation with young minds, and with that engaged pedagogy, they transform. The teacher acts as a catalyst, and teacher emerges as a transformative intellectual. The way bell hooks engaged pedagogy transformed that student. She gained her agency. She gained her confidence. So teachers as, transformative intellectuals. Now, all this is the essential concept with which I talked about. Dialogue, compassionate listening, and engaged pedagogy. Now let me come to the third aspect of it, that if that was the dream of this vocation of the teaching, now why it is I'm saying the quest today, why is it search today in these troubled times, in these difficult times? Now let me share with you, and what these troubled times are all about. And some of you will join, I'm sure will join this vocation, and you're young. You will begin the world. And what a world you find yourself today, Now, imagine the world you are living in today, and you join the vocation of teaching. What is the world you are confronting? And this is the troubled world, difficult world. Each age has its own trouble, but look at the troubles and the difficulties our contemporary times are passing through, and how it affects the discourse of education and poses a threat to the dream that I talked about, that is dialogue, compassionate listening, and engaged pedagogy. Now let us try to understand it. It's three components I'll talk, and in the process of our conversation, you can further add to it. The first is, think of, to begin with, what neoliberalism does to us. You need not be a professional political economist to understand what neoliberalism does to it. If you are intellectually aware, if your eyes are open, if you can think politically and sociologically, you can understand what neoliberalism has done to us, is doing to us. Now, and what it has done to education. Neoliberalism as a doctrine, as a worldview, as the dharma of modern life, has done severe damage. As we are talking about education, it has done severe damage to our understanding of education. What damage it has done to our understanding of education? It has trying to demolish everything that we just talked about. Education as critical awareness, education as compassionate listening, education as a pedagogy of hope for a better human world, education as dialogue. Instead, what it is doing, because of the market fundamentalism that is implicit in the discourse of neoliberalism, it reduces education into mere technical education. It reduces education into mere training for the acquisition of the skills that the market demands, that the market needs. In other words, education becomes merely instrumental, technical, reduced into skill learning, and all that sells in the market. It transforms the teacher, not a Polypharian dialogic teacher, not the kind of teacher that bell hooks was talking about, but it transforms a teacher into a trader, into a techno manager, into a service provider who sells education as skill, the skill that can be utilized in the market. And the teacher transforms the young mind into a resource to be modulated, manipulated by the techno managers and by the neoliberal corporate empire. And it transforms the student into a product. It transforms the student into a product. The student is no longer a seeker, a wanderer with perpetual question. Instead, a student is a product. And that product manifests itself in the mythology of you and I are familiar with today, which has entered every household, placement and salary package. So I joined this engineering college, not because whether engineering is taught better there, because there is a good placement and the good salary package. So it's like it's a super mall of education shops. And after class 12 exams, the parents are shopping from this mall. You know, which branch of engineering, which college, what is its placement history, and what is the salary package. So whether it is 10 lakh per annum, 20 lakh per annum, 1 crore per annum, and so it's a product. Imagine the insight of Karl Marx when long back in Capital Volume 1, he was giving us a concept of commodity fetishism, that where relationship between two humans are no longer relationship between two subjects, which I was talking about, which Martin, we were talking about the I-thou relationship. Instead, you and I now become objects, commodities, thing. We are things. We are reification and the commodification. So it's like that I am my salary package, and my salary package is my dowry rate. My dowry rate depends in a patriarchal society on my brand, on my salary package. It's like a t-shirt that the youngsters wear, which I saw, where it is written, "My father is my ATM." And this kind of imagination can come only in a world where there is an absolute commodification and market fundamentalism has taken place. One day, you might see your father wearing a t-shirt where it is written, "My child is my investment." You know, so how much the salary package the child will ultimately bring. if I spend so much amount of money at the cost of danger of that my child might commit suicide, I still send him to the quota factory with a hope that one day he might get into an IIT and earn this package, then I am definitely thinking my child as an investment, whether I accept it or do not accept it. So that is what neoliberalism has done. The market fundamentalism has done. It has completely corrupted the discourse of education. It has completely corrupted the discourse of education. I call it a super mall, where the buying and selling take place. Education is nothing beyond skill learning and instrumental education. And you are a product and teacher is a service provider. So there is no bell hooks, no polo fair, no engaged pedagogy in a theme of this kind. That is the world you live in, the neoliberal challenge on education. Second, in this troubled time, you are experiencing hyper-nationalist aggression and how it affects the discourse of education in our times. Engaged pedagogy is about openness, and learning has education, meaningful, engaged pedagogy is beautiful precisely because it is enabling. It helps you to expand your horizon. It helps you to cross the pond and enter the ocean. It helps you, to expand your horizon. So it's like saying that I'm born in a UP village, but an engaged pedagogue and an engaged classroom has taken me to the world of Martin Luther King Jr., has taken me to the world of Noam Chomsky, has taken me to the world that entire experiment Beatles made, and I have become fond of John Lennon's music. That is what education does. From that small pond in that UP village, I have entered the ocean, So I do not feel hesitant that when I celebrate ideas emanating from other parts of the world. So it's like saying, I'm born in a Hindu family, but an engaged pedagogy has opened my eyes and I feel comfortable with Jalaluddin Rumi's poetry and Iqbal's poetry, and I do not hesitate to quote them. And if I become a teacher, I ask my student to recite Iqbal's poetry. But when hyper-nationalism enters into the corridors of our educational institution, what happens? It restricts me, it limits me, it tells me that this is permissible, this is not permissible. In other words, in the name of diverse packages of Deshbhakti curriculum, you limit the mind of your students. You cross walls, cross boundaries. The mind doesn't become. The ideal is that you become a banyan tree. You have your deep roots. Simply because you have your deep root, you expand your branches into the sky. Simply because you have learned your Sanskrit, that is precisely the reason why you learn Walt Whitman and Shakespeare and love them so well. Simply because you have learned your own thinker, that is the reason why you engage with Marx, Freud, Noam Chomsky, and others. Nothing limits you, nothing restricts you. The limitations of religion, identity, nationhood do not limit you. You become open, you become an open sky. And that is what the engaged pedagogy and liberating education ought to do. And one of the major obstacles today is the hyper-nationalist aggression in the domain of education. And as a result, it is creating an environment of fear and surveillance. Imagine today you being a teacher in a school or in a college, and you are one day saying that, see, children, there was a thinker, there were thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Nietzsche. Karl Marx, in a context, spoke of religion as the opium of people. But he spoke something more. But he spoke also religion as the opium of the people. And Friedrich Nietzsche said, God is dead. Now imagine you just spoke these two lines and a hyper-nationalist observer recorded it, and then this video became viral. Who knows? Next day, a police sub-inspector from UP or Gujarat might knock your door and FIR might be launched against you. Someone's sentiment somewhere, it would be argued, might have been hurt. How a meaningful, engaged pedagogy is possible in an environment of fear, in an environment of surveillance, where ideas are censored, ideas are restricted. And that is what I think that one of the major thing that is a major obstacle that is coming. Tagore realized it long back in his last convocation speech at Shantiniketan, which is printed as The Crisis in Civilization, when Tagore was seeing the war and the rise of authoritarianism and fascism in Europe. Tagore was reminding us again and again that hyper-nationalism could prove to be a monster, could prove to be a danger. And that's why his constant plea for universalism, plea for cosmopolitanism, the liberating ideas, the openness, and that today, one of the major challenges coming from the hyper-nationalist aggression. So neoliberal market fundamentalism, then the hyper-nationalist aggression. And the third challenge, your time, which is coming, is that imagine today what is happening in the name of education. I often feel like crying when I see the school children growing up today. Now, many of these children possibly would never find a good teacher in their life. They would never experience the joy of a very vibrant dialogic classroom. Instead, they would find coaching center strategists. They would find coaching center strategists. We live in a time when quota has replaced Shantiniketan, when coaching center strategists have replaced great teachers, great pedagogues, when guidebooks have replaced great literature, and when standard MCQ-centric standardized tests have replaced critical thinking. So we live in such a time in which, for example, many of these children would never experience the churning of ideas, would never experience a great teacher who makes him or her mad, throws him into a turbulent ocean. They would find only coaching center strategists and MCQ-centric standardized tests, and they would only become warriors. And they would only learn the strategy of picking the correct answer in the OMR sheet. In that world, there would not be any great literature, any great exploration, any great question, any great thinking. They would not study Einstein and Newton. They would study fit G physics. They would not study, great historians like Irfan Habib or Thomas Hobsbawm. They would instead study, Rouse I study notes, So that's the world of all pervading chain of coaching centers and the coaching center strategists and take education, take Baijus and others. So the Baijus, Akash and Brilliant and Kota and Fitji have colonized that entire the mental landscape of our youngsters today and the parents today. So it is here the other challenge, a major crisis to education and to idea. That's why I wanted to converse with you. We joined the vocation with a great dream that it is about engaged pedagogy. It is about transformation. It is about a pedagogy of hope, creating a better world. It is about love, compassion, art of listening. It is about ideas. And today, hyper-nationalist aggression, neoliberal market fundamentalism, and the coaching center utilitarian learning that are causing great dangers to the field of engaged pedagogy and education. But since you are doing a course in dialogue, your challenge is that if anything you take from this course, that despite these obstacles, can you still try? Can you still try, fight the battle, and try to create a world that trusts the spirit of dialogue, listening? Because if dialogue disappears, democracy dies. If listening disappears, cult of narcissism and authoritarianism begins. So in an age where democracy is first reducing itself into some form of electoral autocracy, where leadership is reduced into cult of narcissism, and some kind of authoritarianism is all pervading from China to United States to Brazil to the other parts of the world. Under this world, where the neoliberal assault and the tremendous climate emergency and climate crisis leading to a risk society, and there is tremendous violence in the world. In such a world, if we try to create a better world, create a just world, then education, studentship, teacher, student, dialogue, listening ought to play a key role. We have a role to play. Now, many of you will question that is it possible under these circumstances? I would end with a beautiful phrase from Antonio Gramsci, that Italian Marxist, Mussolini sent him to jail, and in prison notebooks, where he reflected a lot of things on Marxism, on historical materialism, on philosophy of praxis, on organic intellectuals, traditional intellectuals, on Italian art, music, culture, education. So he used a phrase, compared this two beautifully: pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. So now see, in Gramsci, what happened? In Gramsci, it was the optimism of the will that operated. See him in Mussolini's dark prison. And in that dark prison, he's writing his notes on liberation, notes on struggle, notes on education, notes on painting, notes on art, that prison notebooks. So he's giving us that imagination. When you and I read today prison notebooks, it gives us the view of another world, another possibility, another struggle, a counter-hegemonic struggle to create a better world. Now, likewise, that's why Gramsci would say, there might be, our intellect might take us to the pessimism, that nothing could be done. We are defeated, nothing could be done, And many of us today experience cynicism, a sense of defeat, a sense of nihilism. And believe me, authoritarian masters always want you to be pessimist. Authoritarian master always want you to say there is no alternative. Authoritarian masters always want you to become nihilist. And we can resist authoritarianism mentally, psychologically, politically, culturally, when we begin to see a new possibility. And that is through the optimism of the will. So this optimism of the will is very important. And that's why there's another expression, pedagogy of hope. And it is this pedagogy of hope that we need. Hope for a better world. Hope for a just world, human world. The world that you and I today confront is crumbling today. Climate emergency, large-scale violence, rise of authoritarianism worldwide, gross inequality, extreme polarization, war, So in this world, now search for a better world, the pedagogy of hope. And here, teacher as transformative intellectual, teachers as dialogic beings, and teacher, student as wanderer and creative subject can play a key role. So we began with this dream. Although times are extremely difficult today, I want you, the new generation, not to lose that spirit, not to lose that dream, And And that is where I just end it there. It was a free-floating conversation. I didn't speak any bookish language. I just spoke the way ideas came to my mind. And I want you to feel free to make your observation so that it really becomes a dialogue, a conversation. And thank you once again for listening to me.
Thank you so much, sir. So, as already sir has floated the room to be open, and let us all be that student in Bell Hooks classroom. And just, this is a great opportunity to actually depersonalize ourselves and, reclaim our ideas. So maybe we can begin with Naeem, because Naeem wanted to seek some clarification with regard to neoliberalism and relationship with the student. So, Naeem, please, over to you. And then whoever wants to really add, please raise your hand and then unmute, and please proceed like that. That will be great. Thank you once again.
Sir, thank you very much. It was a very inspirational speech. I couldn't really, I confused to even I should write it, note it down, or just listen to you. It was very great listen. I really appreciate and grateful. Thank you so much. I'm feeling deeply pain for Afghanistan, even our students, our teachers, because our students in Afghanistan even don't believe that, or even they couldn't dream that we would have a very good world in the future, or when they are conveying their messages about dialogue or having a great tomorrows, even our teachers do not believe on that. However, the thing is not about that. I wish one day through Afghanistan we could held dialogue programs for Afghanistan, for teachers, for students to believe on the dialogue, to implement the best ways in Afghanistan. Sir, just I want to ask you that if you can repeat the neoliberalism done with students, what neoliberalism done with our students? If I ask you to just repeat this section, I really like it and I want to note it down, sir. Thank you.
Pardon, just repeat. What was the last point?
I want to, if you just repeat one again, what the new liberalism done with our students.
Yes. So Naeem is basically, he wanted to ask that when you proceeded with explaining the impact of neoliberalism upon teachers and students, how has it transformed the students from being a non-wanderer, a non-seeker, to what? So that is what Naeem was wanting to ask.
Okay. Okay, I think, Naeem, it's a good question. What I was trying to say, that what neoliberalism or market fundamentalism does, it causes damages in three fronts. First, it reduces education into mere training. Training for what? Training for the acquisition of the skills that the market and its associated technology needs. In other words, its vision gets extremely restricted. It is becoming more and more technical, market-driven, productive, instrumental learning and education. And it transforms the teacher into a service provider who delivers those skills, those knowledge capsules that the market demands, that the market needs. And student becomes now merely a product with a market value, or student becomes merely a consumer of those skills that will enable him or her to redefine himself as a more branded product with an attractive payment and the salary package. The substance of education gets reduced into a merely utilitarian value. This is what I would call what Habermas said in a different context, colonization of the life world. So the logic of the market colonizes the domain of learning and education, because meaningful learning is about the expansion of mind, about critical thinking, about exploration of the world. But the colonization of education by the market, what it does, it limits those, it restricts those, it is becoming purely technical and instrumental. That is what led to, American philosopher, social scientist Martha Nussbaum has written a book, Not Everything is for Market, Why Liberal Arts Matters. So Martha Nussbaum argued that with the neoliberalism, what is happening is that throughout the world, and even many leading universities, including America and the West, liberal arts and humanities are in decline. Not more funding and all that, because major emphasis is merely on what the market considers worth learning. Market considers important. So it's like saying, one day neoliberalism comes to a leading public university in India and says that if you write a PhD thesis under the supervision of great historian Professor Irfan Habib or Romila Thapar, it doesn't fetch you a job. Instead, remove history department, introduce fashion designing or hotel management. Because history is useless. Corporate do not need it, or abolish the department of literature. There you start a department of electronics. This is what Martha Nussbaum is saying, that market fundamentalism is altering the character of a liberal public university. And these are in danger today. And these are often seen to be non-productive, because the notion of productivity is being defined purely in terms of the market value, not in terms of the quality of the mind, the creativity of the mind, thinking of the mind. So this is what, neoliberal market fundamentalism is doing, both to the meaning of being a student and the meaning of being a student and teacher, and destroying the spirit of engaged pedagogy, dialogue, new questions, critical questions, all this.
Thank you, sir. I think Nine has dropped off because of probably internet connection or something. We can take up questions from or observations, anything that you would like to add. Asna, would you go ahead? Would you like to ask something? Unmute, please, before speaking.
Audible? Am I audible?
Yeah, please be louder.
So first of all, I would like to reiterate the quote that you said: pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. Thank you so much, sir, from the bottom of my heart for taking this session. It was truly insightful and gave me that optimism to go on in this world, to learn more things, to unlearn things. And as a student of the discipline sociology, you have engaged in many concepts of different sociologists and other thinkers. The class was very much interactive. I would not call it a class again. It was a dialogue. It enabled beautiful dialogue in us. And thank you so much for opening a new world to us. So I would not like to ask you any question, but I'm truly grateful for giving this much time to each one of us. Thank you so much.
Nana, thank you very much. You were studying for where now? Sociology?
Sir, I'm a student at Jamia Millia Islamia.
Okay,
I'm pursuing my
okay.
graduation.
Okay. Very good. Now, Ekdom, carry on. And you are from which place? From Delhi?
No, sir, I'm from Kerala.
Gotcha, you are from Kerala. Okay. And a lot of students from your state also in JNU. And I have visited your department number of times. Many of our students are teaching there. And Nana, very good. Do a study well. And it's a great university. And just look at the history of Jamia. It's such a great history and that great institution. And my suggestion is that to grow up is that each age has its own challenges and the difficulties. There will be difficulties, there will be challenges, but keep the pedagogy of hope alive. Because the moment it is dead, we are only then physically alive. We only eat and drink, but we do not live. Which you see, I often see many of these corporate slaves, that 16 hours constantly working, and Saturday and Sunday suddenly, that the modern slaves have got freedom, and then just they go to the mall and mindless shopping and then come back mindless drinking. So so that's not living. That's not living. I forgot to tell one incident. Jiddu Krishnamurti, while talking to young children, once said that, children, what do you think? What is education? Is it only learning physics and mathematics and English grammar and geometry? These are all very important. And then he says, and he was talking to Rishi Valley school children, saying, but how many of you watch sunset? How many of you watch sunset? Have you ever watched the sunset with pure attention, with pure care? So, and when you watch sunset with absolute mindfulness, you see a great thing happening, and it makes you humble. And it is the religiosity of life. So always try to see that. Now, it's a great educator could say it. Now, what a market fundamentalist would say, that's a waste of time, That's a waste of time. Watching sunset is a waste of time, Those 5 minutes, you could become more productive in terms of enhancing the profit rate of the corporate. So that is that notion of productivity with which this corporate mafia colonize our mind and colonize our world, that only a meaningful education can give us the courage to question that, to interrogate that. And life is not just placement and salary package. There is something more in life. And that is, I think, that the good studentship is all about. Yes, we all need bread and butter. But we do not live only by bread and butter. We live ideas, we live music, we live literature, and we want sunrise and sunset. We want Beethoven. Otherwise, how do we live? Thank you.
Sir, we have a question from Sonal. And after Sonal, whoever wants to really ask, please go ahead right after her.
Good evening, sir. That was an amazing session we had, and thank you so much for this. Well, even I want to ask the question about the new liberalism, fundamentalism you mentioned, that it has done severe damage in several aspects. So in this today's world, we are living in this today's world where people are going to, prove their own existence. Okay, they are selling themselves to be a part of society, to be a part of, the world. They want to, they are going through some existential crisis. I don't know, it's imaginary, but yes, how to survive in this world. And all these are giving them the options to, okay, upgrade yourself skills, present yourself this way, do this, do that, and then you'll be able to live. But how to raise that awareness that even beyond this, a world is possible where you can enjoy your life at the same time, you can unlearn things, and you can learn new concepts and, live the way you want. Because I guess that will take much of the energy and pressure to reach to the mass and students, and of course their parents nowadays, because not only students but parents are more into this. So how to do that?
I think that it's a very deep, authentic, existential, political, sociological question. And we all have to respond to that questions according to our biographies, according to our perspective, locations. But only one or 2 points I would say is that, uh, uh, it's like I'll just give you an illustration that suppose you are a good painter, artist, suppose. Now, and you are drawing a landscape. One day you did something, next day you see it, you didn't feel that it's not coming properly, it's not good. You threw it. Again you do it. Again you do it. Maybe after 8-9 days, something happens, you feel very happy. And you feel elated, you feel contented that what was inside me, now I could express it through my landscape. Now, all great painters would say that there was some idea haunting and one is trying to articulate it and express it. But for that, a price has to be paid. And that price is that maybe 6 days, 7 days, he didn't succeed. What she or he was drawing was not coming to his satisfaction. I gave this illustration that when you choose a project, it is never an instant Starbucks coffee. There is a price, there is a struggle for that. And I think that I gave Gramsci's illustration, ended with this, that what he was saying, that, that through dry intellect, there is every reason to be a pessimist. That the world is bad, the world is ugly, but it is, and who experienced it more severely than Antonio Gramsci? That he is in a dark chamber, dark cell in the prison, but he's still creating, writing that notebook. And that is because of the optimism of the will. Now I think, and he paid a price. Now for everything, so when we choose a lifestyle, suppose the other day, I got an opportunity to talk to a student who just wrote class 12 exam, completed it. Now his parents, as usual, average normal Indian parents, want him to become an engineer, not just an engineer, to become a computer engineer. Because everybody in India want to become a computer engineer. Want to become a computer engineer, and that too in some branded college, with appropriate history of placement and salary package. Now that young boy says he doesn't want. He wants to study theoretical physics. He wants to become a scientist. Now his parents are constantly injecting his mind with fear. If you do well, even in MSc, if you do PhD in physics, even from universities abroad, there is no guarantee of a job. This thing might happen. You might get settled when you are 30-year-old. But if you are a computer engineer, within 4 years, you will get a job in Infosys and Google and all that, things. Now, but this boy is constantly fighting the battle. Now, that the only thing I was just telling him, and he was receptive enough to understand. I was saying that, see, you have 2 options. One is to follow the line, and that follow the line and make your parents happy. Come to one of those institutions, become a computer engineer. After 4 years, join a company, earn money, take dowry in a patriarchal society, get married. Have a child, enter the same ambition in the child's mind, and the history repeats itself. And one day you die. You could follow that trajectory. Will you be happy? Now he says, no, I won't be happy because I won't do what I feel like doing. Society will think that I am successful. Possibly I will also pretend before the world that I am successful, but from inside I am burnt out. I am broken, I am wounded. That I cannot hide from myself. Even if everybody says, see how brilliant this boy is, he earned so much, he is sensitive enough to realize it. And I say, suppose you get a job after 7 years, and after 4 years, all your friends get job, and some of them get married. But you are containing your PhD, and then after 7 years, and suppose after that struggle, you do a good research and become a good physicist, will you feel happy? He says, I'll feel happy. Even that struggle then would acquire a meaning. I would feel happy and nobody can deprive me of that happiness. And in the ultimate analysis, I know if I am happy, one day my parents will feel happy. Because even if after 4 years, I become a computer engineer, earn a lot of money, apparently fulfill the wish of my parents, and when I come back from the office, I wounded, I come to the dark corner of my room and start boozing, because the entire day I spent a meaningless life. Ultimately, my parents also would not feel very happy that despite such brilliant career, good salary, my child is decaying from inside, dying from inside. So I think that every family, every household, we need dialogue today. We need conversation. And I'm telling you, if we do not do it, like farmers' suicide, student suicide will become an epidemic in India today. Count this month how many suicides in Kota have taken place. Just count this month how many suicides have taken place. Indian middle class refuses to acknowledge it. The day newspapers will begin to publish it the way it was publishing COVID statistics, how many fell sick, how many died. The day newspapers will publish January, so many students suicide, February, so many students suicide, maybe the parents will be awakened. It is going to become an epidemic in India today. A rose is a rose, a lotus is a lotus. You cannot transform a rose into a lotus. It is ugly if every student who studies science wants to become computer engineer. It is ugly if every student who opts for humanities after graduation ends up in Mukherjee Nagar in Delhi and spends their useful youth time for reading IS notes, and only 1% becomes successful and the rest live with depression and anxiety. That's not the sign of a healthy society. No matter what coaching center tells, what market tells, what middle class ambitious parents, anxiety-ridden parents tell, it is sickness. It is pathology. And we are killing minds today with this pathology. And it is high time teachers, students, concerned citizens, and I too want that with people's movement, it should become an issue in politics. Save education, save our children. Save education, save our children. That I think is becoming a major issue today. Yes.
So I think here we can say that media can play one important and major role in spreading awareness among the parents, those who are forcing their expectations on their children. Because I went through the same, and the expectations of parents, and yes, but I managed to live my own choice, to my own choice, and that's what I'm doing. But yes, that was really difficult. That phase was really difficult, which I went through. So thank you for this. Thank you so much.
It's difficult, but I think that, it's a war zone today, and it's an existential question today that, what life I take, and as I tell you, each possibility has its own danger, has its own risk, has its own struggle. But ultimately, the choice is that what can fulfill me, what is inside me, and imagine, I'll just end, imagine that someone who could have become a great professor of history, great historian, has become a customs officer through UPSC and gets his posting in Indira Gandhi International Airport. And what a miserable life he will lead. He can pretend that he is happy, but from inside, every night he would lament that my life is a failure. I am, but I'm not happy. I'm not happy, And maybe someone is earning a little less, but possibly leading a more contented life, Because the thing is that the market fundamentalism is telling us that happiness is a market-driven index. That is not.
It's very sad. Yeah, because along with the suicide, the young deaths by heart attack and brain hemorrhage is also increasing nowadays because of all the stress.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonal. Thank you, sir. Someone else? Maybe someone else can add to some ideas of, even if you have a choice, then how do you seek support to pursue that choice? Juniali, because on my screen, I can see right next to sir.
Pardon, Rashmi, what you were saying?
No, I think we'll probably take just one more question if anyone has anything to. Okay, so Sayeda and Zikra has raised their hand. Yes, Sayeda, please go ahead. And after Zikra, you can also ask. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I have a question, sir. Like you mentioned how it is important to have this culture of critical thinking today and how teachers can play a very important role in inculcating this culture of critical thinking. But sir, if you see the kind of one of the eligibility criteria to become a professor today is passing the NET examination, sir. So the kind of questions that we get in the NET examination is like, it is so factual. So when we are trained to fulfill this one thing, that is you like throughout the masters we were told you have to pass the NET examination, prepare yourself like that. So sir, when we are trained in a way where we only have to memorize facts just to pass that examination and then become a professor because that serves the eligibility, sir, how do you think that such professors can actually inculcate critical thinking then?
I'm happy that you raised this question, and that was one of the points that I was saying about the third obstacle, MCQ-centric standardized test and coaching center and the strategy of picking the correct answer in the OMR sheet. That has become the substance of our evaluation process, and it is tragic. And the kind of exam you are talking about, NET, in fact, long back, 4-5 years back, I wrote before the exam, NET exam, wrote one article in the Wire about this exam. I tend to feel that it's a conspiracy against thinking. It's a conspiracy. I am using a harsh word. The way all great educationists have written extensively against MCQ-centric standardized tests, It is for mass elimination. It is not for actually selection of the right people. It is for the random elimination. And this exam particularly, and I say that it's a conspiracy because it is against thinking. It is against reflexivity. It is against interpretation. And meaningful dialogic learning begins only when you and I are ready to acknowledge knowledge is not just a piece of information. Knowledge is not just a discrete, disembedded fact. Knowledge is about interpretation, about reflection. And interpretation and reflection, and that too in the higher realm, is so important. It was like saying that suppose an examiner from National Testing Agency that formulates those questions ask a question that in sociology paper, that which book was published earlier, The Rules of Sociological Method, Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism, Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, The Structure of Social Action. What does it prove? Does it guarantee that a student who knows which was published earlier has necessarily read that book, has necessarily understood the nuanced arguments of the book? Likewise, not every question has one correct answer. Was Karl Marx a determinist? There is no yes-no answer, because Marx was a very complex, creatively nuanced, dialectical thinker. So on the one hand, there was a Hegelian idealist Marx we could see in Economic and Philosophic Manuscripts of 1844, talking about alienation, talking about whole man, creativity, subjectivity. And again, there was also, with Engels, a reductionist, deterministic, economistic Marx. So there are multiple currents inside Marx. So it is very difficult to say, it is impossible to say in terms of yes or no. He was much more complex. And a good student of sociology or social science who would become a teacher or a researcher ought to sharpen that art of entering into that complexity, into that ambiguity. But NET exam is a completely destroying. The very act of preparing for that exam destroys your minds, kills your creativity, kills your imagination, possibilities. And I think that's why I personally do not see that there is any correlation between someone being qualified in the NET and someone is really oriented to research. There may be, there may not be. If it is true, it is merely accidental, not because of NET, And because NET exam as such is ugly. It's a conspiracy against education. And likewise, I believe that throughout, that the pathology of standardized tests, learning has become merely preparing the children for test and for exam. And that has created a lot of problem in terms of education as reflexivity, education as thinking, education as criticality, and it is only creating a very utilitarian technical mind, and that I think is creating a great damage. And especially in liberal arts and humanities, MCQ-centric NET exam and standardized test is just a pathology, is something that has to be protested. And I believe unless teachers and students come to the street, teachers also, professors also, and raise their voice against it, things won't change. It's a sickness. It's just a sickness that has entered. And you won't be surprised the way this sickness has entered our life. If after some time your semester exam become MCQ-centric exam, and even your semester exam being conducted by National Testing Agency. So that's sick. That's a disease. That's a sickness. And one should call a sickness. One should not hide it. And NET is the pathology. I do not approve of it.
Sir, we have Zikra and Poonam, two more questions. Please keep your questions a little short and very specific also, so that we can have both the questions together, sir, and then we can proceed with your expression.
Good evening, all. Thank you so much, sir, for the beautiful session. It delivered. My question is, what are the reason and causes in present time teachers are not dreamed, as you mentioned about the dream in the starting of your session? Even teachers in this time are to their profession. Why it is going on? Even teachers and students are not honest to their profession and their jobs. Thank you.
Rashmi, I could not
Yes.
hear properly. Could you just explain it to me?
Sir. Yes, sir. So basically, Zikra is trying to connect the inability of the teachers and the students to really express this idea of dream that you had shared, early on in the beginning of your lecture. That, one has to have that dream. So why are they unable to really
Okay,
bring
just
it
repeat
together?
it. Repeat it.
Why are the students and the teachers unable to pursue the dream, that the hope that you had shared in the beginning of your lecture? So this is what Zikra is trying to ask.
That was the point I was trying to say, that we live in such troubled times, such difficult times, characterized by, as I said, the neoliberal attack on education, hyper-nationalistic aggression, and this coaching center kind of learning. So these obstacles are so enormous, So it is easy to fall into the trap of the pessimism of the intellect. And that was the point. It is easy to be a pessimist. It is easy to be a cynical because obstacles are so enormous. But as I would argue, that many great works have emerged out of difficulties, out of struggles. That is what I call the optimism of the will, to borrow Antonio Gramsci. Now, Gramsci's prison notebook came not when Gramsci was on sabbatical in a university, when he was in the prison. Bhagat Singh's diary came when he was in prison, when he was in jail. Such young person wrote such brilliant diary, brilliant notes. Likewise, I think that the example that Bell Hooks gave, she herself being a Black American woman, born in a ghettoized Black colony, but the struggle she fought, difficulties she experienced, engaged with Paulo Freire, Thich Nhat Hanh, and became a great scholar, continually questioning racism, patriarchy, reinventing the classroom, rethinking education, arousing new hope among the young minds and students. So that was precisely because of that pedagogy of hope, optimism of the will. So this is where I believe our challenge. There are moments in life when each of us will face an existential crisis, and it will look that everything is dark now. There is no ray of hope, no sun ray. It's just dark, dark, dark. We all pass through that. And possibly it is at that moment we require more perseverance, more contemplation, more light of intelligence, light of knowledge, to see that beneath the darkness, there is a light, and there is a fountain in the desert, and that I think is the quest, is the search. So how one achieves this is very difficult to say. But I think that all of us who engaged in the struggle of life experience it time and again in our everyday life. This dialectic of pessimism of the intellect and the optimism of the will, at times complete darkness, complete despair, and then again our urge to come out of it, seeing a new possibility. And I think with this dialectic, life goes on, and possibly good education, meaningful education, dialogic education helps us to find that meaning, to pass through that, And that's why as I said, that if education, meaningful dialogic education with compassionate listening and critical thinking disappears, democracy disappears. And democracy cannot be written, cannot be sustained unless there is dialogue in society. And classroom reflects the society. So in UP Muzaffarnagar, what has happened, when it see the poison that has entered into our minds, see the times. Now, a student belonging to a different religious community, small child, being beaten up, slapped by students belonging to another religious community. And the teacher is encouraging that. The child mistake is that the child at that moment could not recall the tables. And then see the mode of punishment, the communal color attached to this punishment, the violence that the teacher has internalized, the prejudices that the teacher has internalized, the way classroom has become violent. That is where you see where we have degenerated, where the poison has entered. It is in every household. It is in the classroom. It is in the street. And see the professor of class 12 teacher of Symbiosis University in Pune, in the Hindi class, what he was teaching, he was saying essentially, which many talked about, right from Kabir to Guru Nanak, that all paths lead to one. Call it Allah, call it Shiv, call it Krishna, call it God, call it Jesus, pray anybody, all take you to the one. It hurt the sentiments of some fundamentalist group. The teacher was immediately suspended. Police filed an FIR in Pune. You must have read this report. Now, that's the society we are creating. That's the violence that has entered in the classroom. And that's why your generation, you are young, you have to again and again assert, no, we do not need this world. We do not want this world. We need the light of education, the light of education that humanizes me, that broadens my vision, that enables me to see a human being as a human being, not through caste, race, religion, nationality. That I think is liberating education does, dialogue does, compassionate listening does, and that is what we need. We need it more today. It's like saying that you search water more in a desert. And that's why you'd strive for dialogue and peace more and more in a non-dialogic world, in an authoritarian world, in an instrumental world. And we have to search, we have to say it, every look, no matter what our capacity limitation, initiate a debate in your own family in the dining table. That's what's happening around us, And if we do not do it, what might happen, that if we enter that in our school, if we encourage that ghettoization, that hatred, that communalism, that division in our school, in our education, in our family, then one day it might happen that one day you might find your young brother died in an encounter or through police fire because he too, watching those television channels, became part of a militant group and took part in the riot, and then he died. Then it would not happen to other people only. It will happen to your brother, my son, your family, if it enters everywhere, So none can be safe. None can be safe. The way in the climate crisis, nobody is a winner. You see the record-making temperature in America and Europe. You see the flood in America, wildfire, Neither the first world nor the third world is going to be safe in the climate crisis. If there is a nuclear war, then it will also demolish White House. Nobody is safe. So, and if this violence enters, none of us is safe. Communalism would enter our house. Brothers will kill brothers. Sisters will kill sisters. One of my students, before my retirement, told me, and it was still it's still me, she told me that, sir, my father believes Arnab Goswami more than me. When in the vacation I go back and I tell JNU, there is no jihadi in JNU. It's not that in JNU all students with guns and constantly getting the training in terrorism. Instead, professors and students are discussing in the library canteen with a cup of tea, talking about many things. Hostel late night debates are taking place. Father says that your friends in JNU and your teacher in JNU have brainwashed you. JNU is what is being said in the primetime television channels. It is full of tukre gang. That is where it has entered. Urban, upper middle class, English speaking, upper middle class family in Mumbai. This is where it has gone today. And that's why you and I have to understand the gravity of this crisis, where we have degenerated today.
Sir, we will take one question from Poonam, but Poonam, before you go ahead, there is another question from Asif Ali, who has already posted it in the group to me, I think, directly. So I'm going to put this question, and then Poonam will ask the question, and then, sir, you can take it up. So Asif basically has asked the relationship between AI, that is alternative intelligence, which is predominating the current wave of education and thinking and even writing and expressing, and how it will affect dialogue and compassion and pedagogy. That is the question that Asif, artificial intelligence, yes, that is alternative intelligence also, Asif.
Yeah.
And the second question, sir, Poonam will ask, and then we can take it up together. Poonam, please go ahead.
Yes. Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for the enlightening lecture. I was wondering, like, as you were mentioning that the fear of economic security, like the kind of atmosphere corporate is producing, unhappiness, pessimism. So when I see people, I feel that there is deep desire and aspiration to be happy, to be compassionate. But in the country, in India, like majority of the population is struggling in the for their survival, like basic necessity. So, like being a student coming from a remote village, and my parents are farmer, there are many of my friends struggling from the same situation. I want to do good research, want to become good researcher, but there is fear of like the kind of job crisis going on in our country. There is fear of like economic insecurity in our mind. Yeah, so I thought in that direction, like parents pushing their children to get job and pushing in that direction. It's quite naturally coming in them, because they haven't been able to secure basic necessity throughout their life, and being is struggling for that. So how to like overcome from that fear and thrive in what like we are doing right now? Yeah.
No, it's a very good, authentic question here. Okay. So Rashmi, I answered this too. Yes. So I'll answer to you, but before that, there was one question on AI, artificial intelligence. There was one question. I do not know whether I am the right person to answer that question. I myself have begun to read a lot of things about artificial intelligence, its possible implications and impact on education, on human culture, on health, medicine. So I'm still trying to make sense of that. But one thing which I believe in, which I would respond in that, which is my way of seeing the world. And I believe that it is better to be humanly imperfect rather than technologically perfect, and it's nice to accept your fragile existence. It is nice to accept your weakness, your vulnerability. So it's like saying that even when you see assignments before artificial intelligence, but which it took us to the artificial intelligence, you give an assignment, say to write 3 pages on Marx's notion of alienation. And one student with broken English, with difficulty, tried hard to read Marx and express it in his or her own way. Maybe arguments are not still very developed, not yet absolutely perfect, but there was a genuine attempt to understand Marx, work with Marx, and to express the way the student is understanding Marx. And another student, you immediately feel that it's a completely, internet borrowed, technically perfect answer, but borrowed completely. The language, everything is completely borrowed, with appropriate notes, appropriate references, appropriate bibliography. But because that student does not write that language. It's a borrowed language, borrowed from other resources, internet, cut and paste. So I believe I would tell that student who has borrowed it, let's see this one. Now, he or she is not technically perfect the way you are because you have borrowed it. But there is a spark in that. There is a beauty in her vulnerability. There is a beauty in her mistakes. There is a beauty in her broken English because there is an element of authenticity in it. But yours is a standardized, soulless, it's not yours. So this is where I believe that when Walt Whitman writes, "To me, every inch of space is a miracle," a beautiful line from one of his great poems. To me, every inch of space is a miracle. Now, maybe one day, artificial intelligence can come forward with another sentence, another poetic line, maybe much more rhythmic and perfect than Walt Whitman. But when you read Walt Whitman poetry, you do not read only that line. You see Walt Whitman, his journey, his spirit, his experience, his wonder, So I think there would always be a human quest for something that is human. And that technology cannot replace it and should not be allowed to replace it. And we can create that conviction only if we believe that it is better to be humanly perfect rather than technologically imperfect, humanly imperfect rather than technologically perfect. It's like saying, I'll just give an illustration, that when you see the standardized beauty contest on television channels, and in the final round, all this contestation, almost all of them look similar. All of them look similar. The way they walk similar, the way they talk similar, the makeup is similar, the way they smile similar, the jokes they crack are similar. And when the last question is asked, if they become the beauty queen, what they want to become, even the answer is similar. Everybody wants to become Mother Teresa, but eventually ends up joining Bollywood. Now it's a trained answer. It's a ready-made answer. Now imagine that beauty queen with all ornamental, all synthetic, with, for example, with an old grandmother, with 2 grandchildren walking in the road after the lazy afternoon and buying 2 ice cream for these 2 grandchildren, and see the smile in her face. That smile is so beautiful. No beauty queen can replace that smile. Imagine after 100-meter terrific race, P.T. Usha is smiling. That smile is extraordinarily beautiful. At that time, she's the most beautiful person on the earth. And I think notion of beauty, notion of aesthetics, notion of creativity, we have to humanize it, and there are limit to technological standardizations, and artificial intelligence, it might have some good effect in terms of medicine and other, but if it is used randomly, it might not be very good for human creativity. But I think there is inherent human creativity that will defy it, that kind of a thing. And your question is a genuine question, and this dilemma is genuine, and this has to be understood. And I believe that there are many who, under extremely difficult circumstances, have to opt immediately, have to leave studies, higher studies, opt for a job, maintain the family. There are family demands. There is an economic crisis in the family. They have to do it. And that act is a very genuine one. And they have to do it. And among them, also there are some, despite that, although they have taken up that, they somehow do not, demolish that flame. They keep it alive. Despite that, they try to find some time when they try to find that interest. Maybe at late night, at 1 p.m., someone is a writer of entire day, family responsibility, going to the office, earning money, working. Maybe at late night, at 1 p.m. gets up and does what he or she is interested in doing. Maybe reading a book, writing a poem, or sometimes, taking part in some activity which fulfills him or her after the office hour. So there are some people who refuse to give up, who refuse to give up. And if I say this because I've seen a number of people of that kind. They have to take up that because the economic hardships, suddenly some challenges have come. The sole earning member of the family died. There is a family responsibility. One is to leave education, take up in a job, but there is a great interest. How, despite the difficulties, keep that interest alive, So I think that different trajectories shape, and if there is a fire in your will, then it gives you the strength, what we call the art of possibility. Art of possibility amid difficulties and difficult situation. So that's the way I would like to see it. I would like to see it. So keep it alive, keep the spirit alive now. Your generation will create another generation. So your hope, your positivity are absolutely important.
Thank you so much, sir. I think suddenly I feel that everything has been unlearned and a new seed has been sown. And many thanks to all the participants. You have raised such important questions that I hope we go back with some more of anxiousness towards being a seeker and a wanderer. And Behzad has extended his gratitude and thanks to you, sir, for you generously being willing to be part of this, critical dialogue, I would say. So thank you so much to every participant.
Thank you,
and
Rashmi.
Professor
Thank
Avijit
you,
Pathak.
organizer, and all young friends and participants. It's a beautiful afternoon seeing you, although online. Nothing can replace the ecstasy of a face-to-face living classroom. But still, I thank you, grateful to all of you for your careful art of listening. And if there is any further inquiry and any question, if you can find my email ID from the organizer, you can write to me. And stay safe. God bless you. Take care. All the best. All the best.